Hey guys, it's Graham. What's crackin'? Warhammer, that's what. Specifically the Eisenhorn series, written by Dan Abnett and published by The Black Library. I guess that's the publishing outfit that does all of the Warhammer books. I don't know if they do anything else, I just know that they're known for that. Look, I'm not going to mince words or intentions. I 100% decided to jump into this series and into this world because Henry Cavill is a huge fan of it, and I think he's gotten a crap deal as an actor. He worked his way up from bit parts in The Count of Monte Cristo, where he played Edmond Dantes' son, and Stardust, where he played the Gaston to Charlie Cox's, I guess, pipsqueak dude who, I don't know, anyway, that metaphor doesn't work. He finally got to play Superman, only to have the entire DC slate mishandled right off the bat by an overrated director who was absolutely the wrong match for the project. But after bouncing around a few Netflix projects where his character got backseated for a female lead, The Witcher and Enola Holmes, he finally gets to strike out on his own and lead a project that he's loved since he was a kid, which is Warhammer 40k. I think it was originally a tabletop RPG, and then the novels came later. I'm not a gamer, so I'm most likely going to just keep reading the novels to get into this world. If Cavill is in, I'm in. And I can finally be reasonably optimistic that we'll get a faithful adaptation of a long-running property and not just the gutted corpse of something popular that's pantomiming current-day Marxism. Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Marvel, DC, Halo, The Witcher, you freaking name it. All these big properties they're all the same crap now. A big corporation will buy it up, put someone's well-connected niece in charge of the writing. They'll change everything about it. They'll crap on the fans for noticing. The only thing worse than a fast food corporate diet is a fast food corporate diet that openly hates you for wanting something better. But that's all corporate entertainment these days. So here comes Cavill. Yes, he's producing and acting in a 40k show. Yes, the show is produced through Amazon. These are the same SOBs that crapped all over the Wheel of Time and then crapped all over the Lord of the Rings. But I am still optimistic because they have adapted the Terminal List and Reacher without any of that typical social garbage infecting it, and without changing those too much. I don't know what the studio breakdown is over at Amazon, but there are clearly different factions within it. And with Cavill in the chain of command, there's a higher chance that those particular people don't try to get in and screw it up and say, okay, well, let's change it and put female space marines and everything, even though that in world there is no such thing as a female space marine, blah, blah, blah. You see what I'm saying? Thus, I thought it would be worth the effort to try it out. Last year, I started by, I was reading a book called Horus Rising, but I ended up smashing my head into a wall of unbreakable lore that I wasn't ready to understand. The 40k universe has tens of thousands of years of established history, and the Horus books, they comprise a huge event that changed a lot of things in that history. I wanted a story about a boots-on-the-ground character who, experiences life in the Imperium in a normal way so that I could get a grip on the setting. After some recommendations, I checked out Eisenhorn. Now, if you're listening to this and you're a Warhammer aficionado, bear with me because I'm sure I'm going to miss a few things here. This is a complex setting with a massive amount of history. As I give a rundown of the story, I'm going to have some questions for you seasoned readers and role players, and I hope you can clear stuff up for me along the way. So, here we go. The story is about a man named Gregor Eisenhorn. He's an inquisitor in the Imperium of Man. This Imperium started on Earth tens of thousands of years ago, and now it spreads across the stars. It conquers world after world. They terraform each world for human life. At the center of the Imperium is the God Emperor of mankind, who decrees the laws and defends the faith against the heretical powers of capital C chaos. As an inquisitor, it is Eisenhorn's job to hunt down heretics and conspirators and thwart their subversion of the empire. This is primarily a religious job with military backing. Inquisitors enjoy a certain amount of legal and martial rank privileges over the normies in the Imperium military. So XENOS, this first full-length Eisenhorn novel, it opens up with Eisenhorn tracking a villain named Murden Iclone to an ice planet called Hubris. You can kind of make a Star Wars comparison that there are tens of thousands of planets out there and they all have different topography to them. It's not like Star Wars in the sense that every planet has one single type of topography from North Pole to South, but they generally have a defining characteristic. And Hubris is a planet that is frozen over for 9-10 months out of the year. Eisenhorn isn't exactly sure what Iclone wants there. He just knows that Iclone is a dangerous heretic. He's got to be stopped. The occupants of Hubris spend most of the year in cryosleep to conserve resources, so they're defenseless when Iclone shows up and starts killing them. Eisenhorn's team catches up to Iclone. They each take casualties. Eisenhorn comes off victorious. He kills Iclone before he can get answers from him. However, since it's not really magic, but for the sake of the video, we'll call it magic. There are ways of interrogating a corpse. He ends up not going through with that here for certain extenuating circumstances. Since the case is unsolved, Eisenhorn retraces Iclone's steps to another world called, I think it's pronounced Goodrun. I read the print book of this. Along the way, he picks up a woman named Elizabeth Beckwin who has the rare condition of being untouchable by psychic powers. Psychers are more or less wizards in this world with mental powers. They can read thoughts, they can force others to do things, and so on. Most people are susceptible to psyker abilities, so being untouchable has certain ups and downs that go with it. Eisenhorn and most of his team, from what I understand, they are psychers to one extent or another. If I got that particular nomenclature wrong, let me know in the comments. But Beckwin is not, and that means he'll have a particular use for her. So en route to Goodrun, Eisenhorn's ship gets inspected by the Navy, only to have naval troopers open fire on Eisenhorn and try to kill him once they realize who he is. This leads Eisenhorn to suspect that the troopers were either deserters or else there are elements of the Navy that are compromised by unknown forces. Neither of these options bodes well for their mission. Once they're on Goodrun, Eisenhorn is able to track down some of Iclone's contacts, but he doesn't get any answers. However, he does cross paths with another Inquisitor named Commodus Voke, who's working the same case. Voke is a little bit older and has more resources. They agree to cooperate to get to the bottom of it. While seeking Iclone's benefactors, Eisenhorn is captured, tortured for information, and thrown into a gladiatorial arena by seditious members of House Glaw, the local big shots on Goodrun. They're fooling around with dark powers that can thwart Eisenhorn's psyker abilities, so most of his normal Inquisitor advantages don't work on these people. It's not good for anyone serving the Imperium. Eisenhorn survives the arena. He's rescued by his team, but he's permanently damaged by the enhanced interrogation. One particular result of this is that the nerves in his head and face were damaged, and he'll remain unable to show emotion. He can't smile. In fact, his face barely moves at all. He can talk, but he can't really make facial gestures. He is able to recover an artifact from House Glaw called the Pontius, but before he can fully figure out what it is, a mutinous group of Navy ships, those guys again, attacks the battle fleet that arrived to rescue Eisenhorn. It leaves everyone with more questions than answers. A whole bunch of them attack the other Navy ships, and then I'm just going to use kind of Star Trek terminology here to explain this. They go to warp. They jump away, whatever the Warhammer equivalent of hyperspace is. And it's clear that Iclone and his mission were more dangerous than originally suspected, but Eisenhorn doesn't know why. He doesn't know how House Glaw plays into all of this. He's not entirely sure what the Pontius is, but he's pulling at this thread and finding a bigger and bigger problem as he goes. With the help of his team, he is able to activate the Pontius, and he finds out that it more or less holds the soul of a Glaw patriarch who died 200 years ago and wants to be resurrected. The current leaders of House Glaw and their allies were going to do just that, using the life force of the sleeping residents on Hubris, hence him going there, but they have since abandoned that course of action. When Eisenhorn and Bequin interrogate the Pontius, they learn that House Glaw is searching for an artifact called the Necrotuke, which is more or less a book of dark magic that teaches mortals how to channel the powers of chaos. Chaos being antithetical to the Emperor and the Imperium. This is in direct violation of the edicts of the Imperium, and it's up to Eisenhorn to stop Glaw and their allies. This would more or less be like welcoming the Antichrist into reality. So, yeah, we don't want to do that. It's bad. From this point on, there's a fair amount of the story left, and most of it consists of, teaming up with the good guys, chasing bad guys, fighting and killing bad guys, exploring the mind-bending planets that don't follow the laws of physics, which I guess happens when you're facing the forces of chaos, like the rules of reality suddenly change. It was gnarly to read about, but Dan Abnett made it at least somewhat understandable, even though it kind of wasn't supposed to be. Yeah. But there are 2 copies of the Necrotuke, and Eisenhorn is able to destroy them both. I think that my favorite moment of the third act of the story was when Eisenhorn himself was tempted by the power that the Necrotuke holds. It reminded me, again, I'm making comparisons to other properties because I think this makes it understandable to the masses, and this is kind of how I wrapped my head around certain elements of the story here. It was like that part in Lord of the Rings where Samwise had to take up the One Ring for Frodo, and the ring started gnawing at him and tempting him with power. And, Sam was like, no, I'm not going to do this. That's kind of what it was like when Eisenhorn faced off with the Necrotuke. It's not just like a book that has naughty information in it. It's directly connected to the powers of chaos, which wants to tempt you to be beholden to it. And it would even make good men say, like, oh, we can learn about this and use it to serve the Imperium. It's like, no, you can't use the devil's tactics to serve God. In a sense, that's what it is. Like, you can't use evil powers to serve good. And he had the self-control and self-determination to destroy it instead of being tempted by it. Acts of righteousness in a grimdark setting like this are the ones that you can appreciate and cheer for. So that's more or less the story. It's less the story. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the general gist of the story. He finds those copies and destroys them, and, mission accomplished. The characters, Eisenhorn has been described as a James Bond type character in Warhammer, and I suppose that's kind of true. He can be a spy and an infiltrator and a combatant and an interrogator. He can do all those things. He's a man on a mission, and he sticks to his principles. I'd say he's more like Reacher than Bond, but it's not an inept comparison. His supporting cast is strong. He's got a man named Amos with him who's got a limitless thirst for knowledge, and he's kind of like a walking hard drive of relevant memories for Eisenhorn. He reminded me more of Thufir Hawat in Dune. Midas Betancourt, he's an ace pilot and a gunslinger. He's like half Commander Riker and half Han Solo. And then Elizabeth Bequin, she's not your average femme fatale. She proves to be very adept at deception, and she works well along Eisenhorn when he's doing the whole spy part of it. Some of the characters were overly similar in function and description and even names, but as long as you keep an eye on the context and events, you can mostly keep track of who's who. It was just one thing to be careful of in a very busy and very unfamiliar setting as I was trying to understand it. There was one character, his name was like Molitor, and another one who was named like Malahite, and you see what it is. But it was still, as long as you stayed focused, it was still easy to keep the general gist of it in the forefront of your mind. At its core, the story is rather straightforward. If you strip away the complicated wrapping paper, you've got a high-ranking law enforcement officer trying to solve a case that blows up into something way bigger than he initially thought. But it's the setting and the characters that broaden the scope and add far-reaching implications for the future. One of the many things for the reader to process is the length of the characters' lives, as apparently they can live to be multiple centuries old. Eisenhorn's tone is written in first person. It's that of a man giving his memoirs at the end of a long career, although he doesn't come right out and say that. It's written like a guy looking back on some of the jobs that he's done. Knowing this and knowing that there are more books in the series, I expect that we'll see big changes in future installments for this character. But more important, after reading a relatable story in the very, very complex and rich Warhammer setting, I feel like I have a better idea of what to expect when I read about other characters in other types of plots. So I'm really excited to try out another 40K title by a different author to see how it stacks up. But in the meantime, there are 3 other Eisenhorn novels and some short stories to read. I'll get to those when I get to them. But I after reading this one, I feel like I have a better understanding of what I'm dipping my toes into versus, reading Horus Rising, which was just like drinking lore from a fire hose. Like I said, I'm probably not going to invest the time and money into playing the tabletop game. I understand that it's expensive and you got to buy, or you got to spend a whole bunch of time painting, and the games can take days, hours, weekends, whatever. I'm not interested in becoming that dedicated of a fan of it. I've got my own time sucks to satisfy, but I want to keep learning about this world and the characters in it, so that a couple of years from now, when Cavill and his associates are done putting together a series, I have a much better idea of what I'm getting into. And of what I've read, it's very cool, it's very immersive, and I'm excited for more. So that's my rundown of this first Eisenhorn book, XENOS specifically, and broad strokes on the Warhammer world. And to all of you big Warhammer fans out there, like I said, if I got anything wrong, elaborate on it and help me to understand this stuff just a little bit better. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.